Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another House Rules video. And this one and the next video, we're going to be looking through equipment. Because equipment is a large subject. Because not only does equipment affect how your character acts, so providing the damage they do with their sword or the protection they get from their armor, but there also can be different ways of acquiring it. Because while it makes sense for your Dungeons & Dragons characters to be going out, killing monsters, getting gold pieces, and buying a new set of armor, a new horse, or whatever, if you're playing in a detective story where your character is a policeman, it makes no sense for them to be buying their policeman car and paying for their ammunition. So there's got to be different ways of handling this. Now, as usual, we'll be looking through a bunch of RPGs to see how they handle it. And then at the end, I'll be updating the shared Google document where we're writing these rules together. Now obviously there's not going to be actually any equipment in this video because we're going to be writing the rules on how we are acquiring it. But in the next video we'll talk about how equipment affects people and we'll write in equipment into the game. But that's the next video. So let's have a look at some games. So, first up, we've got Dungeons & Dragons. Now this is 5th edition, but they all work basically the same, in that you open in, and here we have a weapons table, but it's the same for all the different types of equipment. We've got the name of the item, the cost of the item, what it does, so in case of weapons, damage, the weight of it, and any properties it has. And that's basically the same whether you're buying a dagger, a sword, a set of plate mail armor, or a chicken. It's all the same. And this makes no allowances for where you are. So, if you're in a city where there are a number of blacksmiths competing against one another, it doesn't matter that you're trying to get something like a greatsword. Even if you go out to a village where there's only one blacksmith and he's worked off his feet creating things for the farmers, the greatsword's going to cost the same unless the dungeon master decides to apply his own changes. Likewise, a chicken. You would think it'd be a lot cheaper to go to a farm out in the wilderness where they've got a whole load of chickens and buy one, rather than going into a city where they're far rarer. Now, in one game I can think of, Advanced Fighting Fantasy, it has different prices, depending on the different areas. So, in a city, greatswords will be cheaper along with all other manufactured goods, but food will be more expensive. And likewise, in the countryside, food will be a lot cheaper because it's more numerous there, and manufactured goods are rarer and more expensive. But Dungeons & Dragons has a nice basic system, everything has a price, it's up to the games master after that. And next up we've got Shadowrun. Now this is 5th edition, but they all kind of work in the same way again. Because if we flick into page 424 for weapons, we've got the description, we've got their accuracy, so target number you kind need to get, the damage, their AP, so their armor piercing rating, and their availability before their cost. Now, the availability is the target number you need to get access to them. Now, you might be using contacts, which will help that skill. You might have somebody who's a weapons monger and will be able to get you weapons more easily and lower the target number. But you are rolling against these target numbers to gain access to them, because they are rare or restricted or illegal or whatever. Now this makes no difference for areas, but the games master can apply their own modifiers. So if you're right out in the wilderness, everything will be +2 to the target number to obtain. So while you might be able to get some easy things, everyday items, the more difficult to get items will be even harder. And of course they can apply modifiers that when you're trying to get this item, that the price will be a lot higher. And next up we have Twilight 2000, this massive big box from Free League Publishing, which never fits on camera. So I will discard that and I will just use the player's manual because that's all we need. Now in this game you're playing a soldier, so you should be getting some equipment, and indeed you do. On character creation, we'll use the spook here as an example. We start the game with any pistol, d6 reloads for your weapon, a radio, a knife, or d6 units of explosives, personal medkit, d6 rations of domestic food, d6 rations of clean water. So you're starting play with some equipment, because you're a military officer. But, because the apocalypse has happened, You don't have any supplies coming from headquarters. They're not going to be supplying you with stuff in the future because civilization has fallen. So equipment is very much like the other games we've just looked at, where we get an item. It has various stats, its damage, its critical range, its armor piercing, its weight, and its price. Because you're going to be bargaining for things. You're going to be selling off the equipment you got and you found to trade for items you want. So generally, it's handled like every other RPG, but you are starting with a bunch of preset equipment because you are whichever military career you've chosen. And next up, we've got one of my favourite role-playing games, the Star Wars role-playing game from West End Games. Now, this is the second edition, revised and expanded. Now, the standard setting for this version is as a rebel agent. So you'll be working for the Rebel Alliance, working against the Empire during the Galactic Civil War. Because basically it's based on the original movies, and that's it. But you can play as anything. Because this is a Star Wars role-playing game, you can play as a pirate, as a privateer, as a smuggler, as a bounty hunter, whatever you want. And the game kind of targets towards that. But this leads to a very strange oddity if you are playing the basic Rebel Alliance agent. Because inside, if we turn to the X-Wing fighter here on page 249, we see it has a cost. So while your character might come with a fighter, generally you will be expected, if that fighter gets lost in combat, to go out and buy yourself another. Now this will normally be with ordinary weapons. You lose your blaster pistol, you go out and buy a new one. You can probably requisition one, but it's going to be a very basic item. You might not get what you're looking for. The Games Master might allow that, but the rules are set up. You'll be going out to buy equipment. Now, this often falls in play when your group of rebel agents are wanting a freighter to get around. Now, they want their own version of the Millennium Falcon. They'll obviously start off with something very basic and modify it. But the basic ship they'll buy themselves, and all the modifications they'll end up paying for. They will often get money back from trading in gathered blaster rifles off dead stormtroopers and things like that. But it's a very strange setup that you're working for a military and they don't really provide you with your own equipment. Now, Games Masters can modify around that, but the game itself makes no allowance for this being the generally standard setting. And you can tell it's the standard setting because we have all these fighters. The A-Wing, the B-Wing, the X-Wing, the Y-Wing, the TIE Interceptor, the TIE Fighter, Z-95 Headhunter. And they're the only fighters. Really the only ones that a bounty hunter might have access to will be the Z-95 and the Y-Wing, because they're older vessels, which are used by a range of different people. But this is set up for being rebel agents and includes the prices here because your rebel agent is generally expected to go out and buy their own stuff. And a game which handles it a lot better is Stargate SG-1. Now this is based on the Spycraft role-playing game, but I've never covered Spycraft officially on the channel, so while I have covered Stargate SG-1, so I'm covering this. Now, this handles things in a completely different way, as the items have no price. If we turn to the equipment section here, over on page 300, it's a rather bulky book, we can see that there are no prices, but there are picks. That's because every character has a gear pick. Because they serve in the military, they're allowed to choose certain gear for each mission. And they start off with a certain amount of gear picks, and as they go up ranks, they get access to more, because their higher rank allows them to requisition better items. Now, these go from cell phones, radio headsets, laptops, and these use up your points. So you get your gear picks and you go on your mission. Now, let's say it's a sort of espionage one. You're looking for alien activity on Earth. So you can be choosing a suburban car by grouping together and using a bunch of gear picks for the players to choose that item. I think we worked out that amongst our group, if we took no other equipment, we could choose to have a space shuttle for our missions. But anyway, you can group together to get various items, which are more expensive, or you can requisition small items, weapons, armor, radios, computers, etc., as required. But on your next mission, instead of being on Earth, you're through the Stargate on some alien planet, and you're briefed that there's going to be toxic gas around. You can swap some of your equipment back. Use, for example, I'm not going to need the suburban car, so you get some gear picks back. And you choose to take respirators and perhaps infrared goggles, and you can swap your equipment around for the missions as required. It gives you infinite variety, but limited by the number of gear picks you've got, which is what rank you've become, how well you've done in previous adventures. It's a really interesting system, and as I said, allows you to kind of be a bit crazy and choose totally over the top if your party groups together and spends all their gear picks to requisition one big item. And another game which handles it in quite an interesting way is D20 Modern, which has one of the most innovative and interesting purchase systems I've seen in an RPG. If we flick on to the equipment section, we see that none of the items have a price. What they have is a purchase DC, because every character has a wealth attribute, or skill, or whatever. Wealth and the starting hero. And basically you make a roll on a D20, adding your wealth to it, to get over the DC. So, if you roll successfully, you get access to that item. You have successfully bought it. There's restrictions on there, which, guns need licenses, various items are restricted, etc. But generally, it's for the credit value. You have enough money to buy the item because your wealth is enough. Now, if you keep buying things, your wealth attribute will temporarily go down. But most of the time, your wealth attribute is just an indicator of what resources you have available at the current time. So, if you roll really badly, even though your character is massively rich, it just means that they reach into their pocket and they forgot to bring their credit card, they don't have enough cash in their pocket to buy even a very basic item. Whereas somebody with a fairly small bonus, but rolling a critical success, a 20, will be able to afford almost anything. They've maxed out their resources, they've bought this thing, but they've managed it this time. Whereas the rich person can muck up. It's an interesting way of handling things. And this is an attribute, so you can buy it up over play. It's not based on adventures as such. You're not looting through people's pockets in modern day adventures and stealing their wallets. You are becoming more wealthy as your character is becoming more successful and capable. And I think that's a fantastic way of handling it. So here we are with the Google document with Satanic Panic in it, which hopefully I'll have remembered to share somewhere down below there. But anyway, I have decided to rip off two of the games that I just covered, and it should have been fairly obvious. They're the ones I kind of raved about. I really like the gear pick system from Stargate, which I think is well suited to Satanic Panic, where the players are supposed to be Hellcops, so they are working for an organisation. So the gear picks and them allowing them to choose different weapons, armour, equipment makes a lot of sense. But I also like the wealth system, and that makes sense that you might have adventures where they're not always on duty, and they'll be able to use their wealth. The thing with the gear picks as well is I have decided to incorporate that into a system where we're going to be building the community that the Hellcops are about, that they'll be able to take gear picks and permanently assign them as a group to improving the station that they're based out of. Buying in a forensics officer temporarily for one mission, or permanently allocating those points and giving them a higher value to permanently have a forensics department at their station, which they'll always be able to call on. Now, that's for a future episode. I've got that planned, so we'll come back to that. But scrolling through, I've had to make some modifications. So we go down to the life path, first of all. And at various points in this, when I'd written it out, I'd written that a character had something and it led to them starting play with more wealth or being able to get savings on deals. Well, I've changed all these into basic +1 to wealth. So you tend to start play with 2 points in wealth. Everybody has that. But you can get bonuses to that through your life path. So the athletics, if I scroll down to that one, you become a sports celebrity. With winning comes prizes, giving you a +1 to your wealth. So the character is more wealthy. Oops, I seem to have put an extra full stop in there. That's it. We've got other ones where working in a shop allows you to make better deals. So you're not actually richer, but your wealth stretches further, which gives you a +1 to wealth. And criminal background as well. One of the outcomes in that gives you black market contacts, which allow you to get things cheaper, so an effective +1 to wealth. Carrying on through, I've added wealth being increased. It costs ×5 to increase it by 1, may mean only increased by +1 per adventure. Gear picks can be increased, costing 10 times its level to increase by 1, may only increase by +1 for adventure. So you can buy those up and you can get access to better equipment by spending experience. We carry on down to the bottom, past the extreme stress stuff we covered last time, and we have wealth. All characters begin play with a wealth of 2, though this may be higher due to increases given to them through their life path. To purchase anything, they make a wealth test using the normal resolution system against the item's wealth DC. If this roll is successful, then the item is acquired. So they're rolling. If they get 6, they get 2 successes. If they get, I think it's 4 or 5, they get 1 successes. If they get 1, then they get a minus success. So they're trying to get the DC, the number of successes required to obtain the item. Only items with a wealth DC may be purchased in this way. So you can go out and you can buy a car with your wealth. You can buy a gun with that, or you can be assigned one from your gear pick. But you can't go out and buy a science advisor for your station by just paying out money. You actually have to have the gear picks for that. So there's certain things you can only get assigned to you, and there'll be certain things you can only buy because you can't get fancy items, a gold Rolex watch assigned to you from your gear pick. We've got any excess successes add to the character's wealth for their next test only. So if you do particularly well, then those successes carry over and allow you to roll extra dice on your next wealth roll because you went in your pocket and you found excess money. Likewise, any failures take away from your wealth for the next test only. So you went in your pocket, found you've come out of the house without your wallet, you don't have your cards, you don't have any cash, so it's going to be more difficult for you to buy other things. Bribery. Basically, it mentions that, let's pull the top of that, you may attempt to bribe other characters, which adds a bonus to your persuasion skill of your wealth. But likewise, to resist it, they get a bonus of their wealth. And because you're attempting bribery, the outcome or consequences of trying to bribe somebody and failing will be far higher. So if you're very wealthy, you can try and bribe somebody who is poor and stand a good chance. But you can't go into the office of a billionaire and try and bribe them because they're massive wealth, they'll just be insulted by it and they will react to you worse. We've got gear picks. Now I haven't clarified these. We will add to this as we add the equipment in the next video. As serving Hell Cops, players get access to equipment in the course of their duties, such as weapons, armor, etc. Characters may have items adding up to their gear picks level, which may be handed back in exchange for different items at any time, or lost items replaced. So they get a gun, it gets taken off them in a mission, they can go back into the station with their gear picks and get another gun. And it's anything that's lost in the course of their duties. So if a player is just playing silly buggers and decides to swap their gun for a nice shiny Rolex watch, then they're going to have problems explaining that when they go back to the office. Where did your gun go? Oh, well, I got this watch for it. That's not in the course of their duties, so they might lose access to those gear picks or be reprimanded for it. But if they're pretending to be a drug addict and they swap their gun for their fix, then that's in the course of their duties. They're doing something, so they'll be able to requisition a new weapon or whatever they've exchanged. If they've lost their gun or traded it away or whatever, they'll be able to get a new one. No arguments. They'll just have to explain why they did it. We're on to equipment. Characters may use equipment items to enhance their natural abilities, but can only gain access to limited amounts, but in 2 ways. Now I'm being deliberately vague because what the items do is part of the next video about equipment. Personal items may be purchased using their wealth and owned permanently, whereas gear picks may be changed at any time, handing back items in exchange for different items or replacement items simply received for those lost in the course of their duties. And at the bottom I've done a little table with a place for name, what ability, so damage for a weapon, defensive bonus for armor, whatever it is, the wealth DC and the gear picks. And as I said, certain items will only be wealth, so personal items will mainly only be available through wealth, and gear picks will be items which are part of their duties. And there'll be a few things which cross in between. Vehicles and guns can be purchased in both ways. But anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual, so thank you very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.